Alright, how's it going, y'all? So, this has probably been my single most requested video in a really long time, and with everything going on with Synology, it's absolutely time to do this. This is going to be a review of the Ugreen NAS Sync operating system and just overall platform. For those of you who don't know, this was a Kickstarter-based project that went ahead and is now a full-blown NAS ecosystem, and it's probably been about 2 years now where they've been actually producing units and sending them on out. And honestly, they have come out really strong. They have NAS units going all the way down to this 2-bay that I've got right here, all the way up to 8 bays, and Ugreen OS, the NAS operating system that actually runs this, is actually very developed. It's missing some features, and I'm absolutely going to be talking about that in the second half of this video. But for a really first round operating system for a NAS provider, it feels really nice and responsive. It is not like DSM-6. It is really fast, responsive, and honestly quite intuitive. And I'll be completely honest with you, they just copied a lot of Synology's operating system, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It is really easy to navigate if you're used to Synology OS, and they have just put the control panel in pretty much the exact same layout and settings to a point where they clearly just said, okay, make this for our own system. The hardware across the board is actually very well built. These things feel like an absolute tank, and they come with a very nice drive trace, and overall the entire package feels very polished. So from a hardware perspective, it is quite impressive. Under the hood of each of these units is also a very powerful CPU in general. This model right here is the DXP2800, and it has a quad-core Intel CPU with Intel QuickSync. So for people who are looking for a Plex hardware transcoding box, this thing is going to be very powerful once you get GPU pass-through setup in Docker, which is its own thing. But across the board, the actual hardware that comes in it is very powerful. It's got minimum of 2.5 gigabit Ethernet on all the units, and also HDMI plugs. Overall, a lot to love in this package, and you're definitely not going to be feeling like this thing is slow and underpowered, especially given that it is a NAS. All right, so before we get started, disclosures. We bought this unit completely with our own money. This is not sponsored by Ugreen. Ugreen has reached out to sponsor us in the past, and we just don't want to be sponsored by a NAS operating system, as obvious conflicts are going to be there. So this is completely independent review. We bought this with our own money. Ugreen did not send us anything, but this video does have a sponsor, our web developer, Visaggio Co. So if you remember back about a year ago, we went through a massive rebrand on the channel, new logos, new colors, as well as a brand new consulting arm, Yarborough Technologies, and we did this all with Matt. So he went through the entire process with us, actually recommended we spin this off, and I cannot speak highly enough of his services. He designed our logos, our website, our new colors, as well as sat down with us and developed a business plan for, hey, what do we want to market? What do we want to look for? How should we approach this? And his advice was honestly invaluable. We went through the entire pro and con of all the decisions with him and helped us figure out what we wanted to make this into. And genuinely, I cannot speak highly enough of him. If you're looking to take your business to the next level, check out Visaggio Co in the link in the description. They offer everything from marketing to branding to web development, all the way to developing a full-blown business plan and everything in between. Their work absolutely shows for itself, so check them out down in the link in the description, and thank you for sponsoring today's video. So this unit is the DXP2800, which is a 2-bay NAS unit with two 3.5-inch hard drive trays up front, as well as two M.2 NVMe slots on there as well. And they have a completely toolless tray design that I actually like a lot. It's very similar to Synology's. However, there is a slight difference with the way the drives come in and out, in a way I think that's quite elegant. Instead of actually having to pop off the sides, there's just this little release button that snaps in and out to slot a drive on in. And for what I've got in here, which is a 2.5-inch SATA SSD, it also comes with screws because there's no way to do toolless design for 3.5-inch and 2.5-inch as far as I know. And they actually have this very thoughtful design that I was really impressed by. One of the key problems whenever you're adding in a 2.5-inch SSD into these toolless trays is there is always one pin that gets in the way. One of the pins that's designed to hold the hard drive in always gets in the way. And the way Synology handles it is you basically don't put that pin in on the right-hand side, which means you just have to keep it somewhere. Ugreen instead has a very great solution where you actually just take out the pin, and it's got this little storage compartment for it, which I was really impressed by. There's little things like that that are really impressive and show that they put a lot of effort into building a very thoughtful tray design. And I'll be honest with you, I've not seen anything like that before. And it's one of those things that clearly shows they put a lot of calories into building these kinds of trays. And this was not just some throw together project. They really put a lot of effort into designing a very solid NAS unit. So overall, just hardware build is really, really, really high quality. Up front, you've got a USB-C port as well as a USB-A port. And on the back, this unit only has a single 2.5 gigabit Ethernet port, two USB 2.0 ports, and a USB 3.2 port. Finally, a HDMI port on the back for hooking up to a media server, or also installing your own operating system on here, because that is actually something you can absolutely do. So hardware build wise, it is very strong and it's just a good solid unit. It also has an external power supply, which for your 2-bay NASs is very common because there's just not a lot of room in here to put a power supply on in. The unit comes with 8 gigabytes of DDR5 RAM out of the box, which is a massive amount of RAM compared to their competitors. And it is also expandable to 16 gigabytes. So you're really not going to run into any kind of RAM limitations with this unit. You're very much going to run into CPU limitations before you do that. The last thing I do want to mention is on the back, we've got a very nice magnetic dust filter that covers up the fan. So it's built well, it's built thoughtfully, and it's in an all metal chassis that really feels solid to build. So from a hardware perspective, this is a premium unit and it feels great. The operating system is actually installed on a separate 32 gigabyte internal storage system. So that is actually something that you do not have to install on the drives. Instead, it's always on there, and it can actually be overwritten and installed something like TrueNAS on there, though there's currently no way to uninstall it and go back to Ugreen OS, so watch out before doing that. And so that's pretty much it for the hardware. We're now going to go ahead and take a look at Ugreen OS and see everything that we do and do not like about this unit. So let's just go ahead and get this thing hooked up, and we're going to be looking at Ugreen OS, UGOS Pro, which is the NAS operating system that comes out of the box with this thing and is generally recommended. All right, so now just gone ahead and powered it on up and hooked it up to the rest of my network. And we're just going to go ahead and log into their interface right here. And as you're going to be able to see right here, the interface is almost identical to Synology DSM. If you look through control panel, you can see that almost everything is laid out in the exact same way. And it is to the point where they even looked at and copied the exact same sub menus. You can easily find every single setting here just by knowing Synology OS, which is really funny to me. And if you look at it, it is very fast. There is an advantage to completely rewriting an operating system and not relying on legacy code, which I honestly think this is a good bit snappier than even DSM-7 is. If anybody was around for DSM-6 for Synology, you remember how you would click on something and it was just a load every single time. This, you just absolutely fly on through. And so overall, the NAS operating system is really easy to use and just navigate. The App Center works great, and they also incorporate commonly used apps directly from Docker. So you can go ahead and install Jellyfin, and it will automatically install Docker and actually set it up as a container. So there's a lot of pieces here that make it very easy to get up and running, and you don't have to spend a bunch of time trying to figure out Docker deployment and figuring out all the different variables you need, because they're just kind of baked in there for you, which makes things a lot easier. So overall, just from a general usability perspective, I like it a lot. They were very good about not having you click on one menu that really opens another application and making that all confusing. That's one thing I've always had trouble with QNAP, where you click on something and it's really on 3 different menu items and it's just popping around and you get confused where you're operating. I think this is something that most people can learn fairly easily. They've got a solid built-in file explorer here, and they do a good job of kind of explaining what the different folders are. So by default, you've always got this personal folder, which is a home folder. And if you're an administrator, you can see the user folder, which you see everybody else's home folder. I think this is a very good way of showing people what this is without causing confusion, which is very hard, and Synology does not do a good job with it. They also have shared folders here, and under the Files app is actually where you create your additional shared folders. When you install drives, you have two different options for what file system you've got, either ext4 or BTRFS. And this is one thing I actually wish they did a better job of pushing people to, is I don't see any reason why they would not push everyone to BTRFS. ext4 is a solid file system for running a general operating system on. So anytime I'm installing an actual Linux operating system, either as a virtual machine or as a hardware, I always use ext4. It's tried and true, and really it's got phenomenal performance when you're looking at running applications that have all these tiny random IOPS. However, it is not BTRFS or ZFS. It does not have checksums and copy on write, snapshots, and scrubbing as effectively as both BTRFS and ZFS have. I think that they should be pushing more and more people to BTRFS because BTRFS has snapshots, and snapshots are phenomenal for a file server. A NAS is a file server at its core, and having the ability to have a rollback functionality where you can literally just go back in time to how files were 3 hours ago without taking up tons of space and compute power is one of the single best features of a copy on write file system like BTRFS and CFS. So on their system, I wish they promoted you to use BTRFS. When you're actually clicking through and installing it, it actually doesn't even have BTRFS as the first option. By default, ext4 is selected, which I think is a big miss. However, one other big miss is they still do not have snapshot functionality built in. They say it's coming, however, it is still not here, and I think that's another miss, and we're going to be talking about that all in a little while here. But remember, this is a brand new NAS operating system. It's technically on version 1.5, however, I'd say it's still not fully production ready because it is missing a few really key features that I'm surprised that they missed. But they are constantly adding and updating this to add in those features. And I'm going to talk about that all in a later bit here. But they are adding stuff into it constantly, which is great. If we look at the App Store, we also have the ability to have some really solid backup applications that now actually support backing up to like an external drive. And I've got an external drive hooked up here, and it will go just directly to that on a schedule. In the background, I'm pretty sure it's just using rsync. And it's got two versions, one where you either do a full backup where you delete things that have been deleted on the source, or you just do a send only where things that are deleted on the source are not deleted on the actual destination. I would like to see one with actual versions on there, but the ability to back up to an external USB drive has actually just been added as well. So they are getting to a lot of these things, and the ability to back up to a USB drive is really key, and I'm glad it is there. And it also supports backing up other devices. So we can either come in here and actually back up our computer, an rsync server, another storage pool, and if we're backing up ourselves, we have two options. We can either back up between storage pools, which means back up to like an external hard drive, or like if you had another share, just like that. Or you can back up to either a rsync server or a WebDAV server. So really great options there. And it does have the core basics for backup built in. There is also a web sync option called Cloud Drives that currently supports both Google Drive and Microsoft OneDrive. So they are constantly adding things in here. They just added this Google Drive option in there. And so it's really in that quick progress phase where they're just adding in all those features that have not been fully added in just yet. And it works quite well. There are 3 modes you can do: upload, download, or a full sync. And overall, it works quite well. I did have trouble when I was backing up to Google Drive, where for whatever reason, I failed to authenticate 3 times in a row, but then finally it did work on the 4th try. So there's a couple of just oddities there, but Overall, it works well and it does exactly what it says it does. And I've not run into any real problems where it actually fails to do any of this yet, which is really key. It's okay not to be feature rich as long as all your features work well. And so far, this is really solid. So there's a lot in here that I really like. You can upgrade your RAID by adding another drive and expanding. So if you've got like a 4-bay unit, you can stick 2 drives in there to start and just add drives to expand the RAID as required. It's got BTRFS built in, but still not snapshots just yet. It has a full recycling bin setup and a task where you can automatically empty them. And overall, the majority of the features are pretty much built on in. However, for it to be fully production ready, it is missing really 2 key things. The first that I've talked about already is BTRFS snapshots. And this is probably my biggest problem with the Ugreen OS as it stands today, because it does not have snapshots. And I don't know why snapshots are not the first thing you deploy whenever you're developing a NAS like this. Snapshots are a magical undo button that just, if you mess something up, it lets you trivially undo it without having to restore from backup. BTRFS already has it fully built in. All the hard stuff with snapshots is already done for you by BTRFS. So I do not get why snapshots have not already been deployed as an application. Even if it's a half-baked schedule where you just say, hey, keep the last 200 versions and that's the only kind of retention policy you have, you can add to that later on. But the fact that they don't have snapshots in any way, shape, or form yet, I think makes this not fully production ready. The next thing that I do think they're missing before you really deploy this in like an office or any kind of more professional environment is they don't have any way of sending email notifications as of this time. So if the volume degrades, you don't have any way of knowing without either getting a push notification on the app on your phone or actually going in, and I believe it will beep if it's got it. So those are 2 things I think are really missing from actually having a fully production system, which I am hoping they will add in very soon. I'm actually going to go ahead and pull up. They've got an article that goes over what they're adding and what they've added in the last 6 months. So right here, they've got this very useful system update plan, which basically says, hey, these are the things we know we're missing. These are the things we're working on and we'll be adding on in. And right here is the section where it's like, hey, by the way, this is what we've done in the last 3 months. And this is where I feel like it's kind of weird that BTRFS snapshots is still on the important future updates in the next 12 months, given that they have added in really odd things like file deduplication, USB pass-through, and DDNS for Cloudflare. Like, there's a lot of stuff in here that I would very much have said, if you're building a NAS, the first thing you do is snapshots and backups. They have added one really key feature in the last 3 months, which was backup between storage pools. That's how I'm able to back up to the little USB SSD that I've got plugged into the front of it. But the fact that they did not add BTRFS snapshots before they went ahead and added some of these things is really weird to me, and I would have liked to see them really focus on that, because it is something that genuinely saves companies a whole lot of money and stress, because it just works in the background without a backup. Obviously, you should be backing up your NAS with versions and everything, but going to backup and restoring from backup is slow and painful. Snapshots allow you to have something critically go wrong and not have to go to your backups and be able to restore so instantly. So I would really like to see them add in snapshots. And one thing I've not seen on here is the ability to send email notifications. I would love to see like email notifications either through their server, which would be great, but obviously does come with a cost with them, or at least the ability to add in an SMTP mail server. So I've just not seen that on the list just yet. And I do think if they're looking for kind of a production system, that should be up there. Finally, the last thing that is really missing from this unit is the ability to like deploy a VPN server. So if we come into our app store right here and we just search for VPN, we get nothing. I really wish they would add in a way to actually deploy a VPN server on here. You can do tailscale by deploying a Docker container. You've got Docker, you can do anything. But the problem is OpenVPN is really useful to run on a NAS because if this is in an office, you can just easily go ahead and add profiles for every single person on there, and they don't have to have a separate system for logging in. You don't have to remember to revoke their WireGuard credentials. You don't have to pay a third-party service to manage your VPN for you. So I really do wish they would add in at least OpenVPN into here because it's so useful to have in an office deployment to just be able to secure your NAS by not having external access to it except through a VPN server, and then you can also access everything. So those are my big 3 things that I would like to see them add before I can really call this fully production. VPN is a nice to have, but I would say email notifications and especially snapshots keep me from being able to say, yes, this is ready for prime time. But as you can see, this is a very developed operating system, and it's come a really long way from where it was even 6 months ago. It is really well ironed out, and a lot of the bugs that have been there are pretty much gone, and I think it works a lot better. So let's also just talk about performance here, and honestly, it is solid. Easily, you can saturate the 2.5 gigabit network connection on the back of this thing. I've got 2 SSDs in here. I will say from deployments I've had with clients, by the way, if you want to hire me, I do this professionally. I set up NASs for people all the time. Check the link in the description, but I have had a couple of deployments with clients who have had UGREEN NASs that are on the 8 bays, and I've definitely noticed when you're using mechanical hard drives, it's not fully optimized when it's doing writes to those drives, and you're not getting the full throughput of each of the drives from what I've seen. I've had them loaded up with 24 terabyte Iron Wolf drives that are pretty much empty, 8 of them in RAID 6, and with all that, and by the way, this was an empty unit that had already done the full volume allocation, we were only getting about 650, 700 megabytes per second. So I think there's a little bit of tuning they need to do with the actual hard drives to really get that full performance. I don't think it's a CPU bound task. I think it's probably just getting better communication with hard drives, especially in a RAID, which I do know takes a little bit of tuning and making sure everything runs well. So overall, if you're using SSDs, you're not going to have any trouble. And especially if you're looking for this thing to be a powerful server, it's got a lot of horsepower under the hood. The price is a little bit on the more expensive side. I will say the hardware inside, as well as the overall build of them, makes that a fair value proposition, and you're definitely getting a premium product with them. This is not some throw together plastic build. This is something that's very well built with great compute under the hood as well. They also don't restrict anything. It is really a do whatever you want kind of operating system. You can go ahead and add in whatever hard drives you want to, and even install your own operating system on there. So there is a really great proposition there, and I think where it gets its biggest value is in your home labbers. It reminds me a lot of Synology, exactly as it was back in the day. Really solid operating system, but kind of do whatever you want. And there's going to be some times where you kind of have to tinker to get something to work just right. But it is really something that's up to you. And I think this is a great product for home labbers. If you're looking to play around with massive Docker containers and have a ton of compute power under the hood, but still want a pre-built package that's got a lot of built-in applications, that means you don't have to spend a ton of time getting started, I think that is absolutely what Ugreen OS is going to be. I do think for people who are not looking to just tinker and need more of a production system and really have their critical files on there, I do think waiting and having the full-blown snapshots and data scrubbing and everything that BTRFS really has to offer in there is something probably worth waiting for. They do just have a standard RAID scrub if you've got RAID 5 or higher. However, they don't incorporate BTRFS scrubbing on top of it, which checks the actual metadata. So there's a lot of things there that I do think kind of need to get ironed out before I would say it's really a great thing to deploy for a business or a company, but they're going in the right direction. There's a few things that I've just not had time to do in-depth testing with, namely some of their apps. Photos, music, video, as well as their version of Synology Drive, which can actually sync to your computer. I've just not had a chance to fully test those out, so I've not brought those up here. And from a security perspective, they do have their own, similar to Quick Connect, kind of relay server that only time will tell if it's going to be secure or not, or if there's any vulnerabilities in there. There's been no major issues so far, and I did do a basic vulnerability analysis, and nothing was found. So I will say, I think it's a solid package, but only time will tell how those services hang up and how well they're going to be supported. But that's pretty much it. If you're looking for a NAS that you really want to be able to tinker with, install your own drives in, and are fine kind of setting stuff up on your own, Ugreen OS is absolutely a great contender, especially for a premium build. Though for people who are looking for the more polished, long-term applications to run a business on, I don't think they're there just yet, but they're absolutely going at breakneck speed. If you have any other questions, leave those down in the comments below, and any tutorials you'd like me to make in Ugreen OS as well, absolutely, because I'm looking to flesh out some of those for everybody who's jumping on in. All right, that's it. Have a good one. Bye.